Today on Locked On Red Wings, the Griffins advance to the division finals and finishing up player grades with Alex DeBrincat.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm formerly of 97 on the Ticket. I had to catch myself there. And Scotty is a freelance journalist for the Detroit News and the host of Locked On Tigers. If I look grainy and I sound a little bit more hollow than normal, that's because I'm recording at my parents' house with my hashtag gamer headset on, but the Griffins played nonetheless. So we wanted to make sure we got this recording in on Friday after they had finished playing. And a hell of a game it was, Scotty, as the Griffins move on to the second round.
Yeah, you're telling me, man. That was it was a really fun weekend of hockey just in general. Obviously a lot of really good playoff games as well at the NHL level, but yeah, man, the Griffins advancing is super fun. Obviously, we're going to break that down here in the first part of the show. So, yeah. Also, we're brought to you by Monopoly Go. This is a fast-paced game where you can team up with your friends for tournaments and unlock awesome prizes like stickers and trading cards, etc. You can even get hilarious emojis to taunt your friends. So download Monopoly Go for free in Google Play or the App Store. But yes, very fun playoff hockey. And I mean, we can just get right into it if you want. I mean, I think, I don't know if we want to do like both games individually or just kind of talk about it as a whole. But I think the biggest story in the game is pretty easily Berggren. He not only did he score another goal in overtime, but as a whole, I think you had said before we recorded, he had 5 points in 4 games. He was absolutely stellar. He was the premier goal scorer that that team was looking for heading into the series, and had two game winners, two of the overtime. Well, yeah, 3 of the game winners total, and 2 of them obviously being in overtime. So yeah, absolutely fantastic. He was stellar, and I think it's pretty hard to look elsewhere for most impactful player of the series, if you will.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly where I was going to go. He's the difference maker in this hockey game, at least the game 4, the series clincher, where he again scored what would become the game winner. Really off the back of a great feed. But I think it was shot by Taro Hirose or L'Esperance. It was a beautiful shot, just went wide, but the setup was fantastic. But it came off the boards behind the net right to Berggren where he buried it. And, I'm not so sold on his performance, his overall game in this series, but time and time again, he proved to put himself in the right place at the right time to score what would then become the game winner. But he did also make a huge defensive play in game 4 as well, where Edvinsson gave up the puck on a power play, and it was Berggren back on a 2-1. And on the pass between, he broke it up to save what could have become a goal against. So he was obviously the difference maker in this one with his game winner. And like you had stated, that's his 3rd game winner. There's a 5-game series. You win 3 games, you win the series, which means that he had the game winner in all 3 of the games. Obviously, like you said, again, the first 2 being the overtime winner, but like this is what you needed to see out of Jonathan Berggren. Like again, like there are definitely some improvements I'd like to see on his overall game still, but I thought he looked like the killer you needed him to be. You need him to be a clutch player in this series, and he has been at every single moment, with the exception of the second game where the entire team got blown out of the water. But he just was clutch in every single moment. That's not something you can teach. Clutch factor is just something you're kind of born with, and he's been there. So we'll see if this leads to a confidence boost going into the offseason. Don't want to get it too ahead of myself here, but obviously he has aspirations to make the team, and the team, Red Wings, would like to have him make the team, considering he's not even a prospect anymore. He's not a rookie anymore. But, we know he has a scoring touch, and if he can improve the overall game, we know the scoring will be there at the NHL level. the rest of it has to come too. But like, it's definitely reassuring to watch him do what he did. The other difference maker in this game, you named Jonathan Berggren, Austin Czarnik. He as well has 4 points in 4 games. He's been absolutely lethal. And it's so funny too. And I think there's no bigger indicator of the difference between the NHL and the AHL. When you have a guy like Austin Czarnik, who played 38 games at the NHL level with the Red Wings because of injury this season, had 1 point in that span. Granted, he played fourth line minutes, didn't get a lot of great opportunities minutes wise, but I mean, he couldn't put the puck in the back and he couldn't really drive a line at the NHL level. You put him in the AHL level, dude's a workhorse. The dude thrives in the American Hockey League. And his goal today, his goal on Sunday, was nasty. Much like Berggren's, where he put it between the ear of Comesso and the post. Czarnik post in from a super sharp angle. Just 2 nasty goals by 2 guys who just feast in the AHL. Czarnik is the other difference maker for me.
Yeah, no, and that's another one again that to your point at the beginning is series wide, not just Sunday's game. Yeah, absolute. Like you said, I think workhorse was really the way that I would describe how he played all series as well. And again, like the ceiling for Czarnik is not, I don't think, uber high, but I having that type of depth is what good organizations do, right? Like good organizations have players that are I don't know, like in baseball they call them like 4A players, right? Like you don't want those guys to be on your third or line or your second line, but having them in the system and be able to fill in those roles on the the fourth line or the bottom 6 is valuable. And so yeah, he was great though, man, and he it's a high motor, and we saw that when he came up and played at the NHL level, right? Like he was buzzing. At one point, they put him out there with the big boys. He was sharing a line with Patrick Kane at one point because he was that guy that was just going to go and high motor go get the puck for those the producing wingers that are on the team. So yeah, man, he dude's got a high motor and showed it again in this series for sure. I think he's absolutely star too.
Yeah, notable performers. I mean, Sebastian Cossa, especially in the third period. After that they got that second goal to bring themselves back into it. The Ice Hogs, I think that was a Reichel goal I have written down here. That one-timer, beautiful set play, by the way. They were buzzing. The Ice Hogs were buzzing. In a game that was mostly dominated by the Griffins, the Ice Hogs pushed back in the third period, and Cossa, especially in the final 10 minutes of the final frame, was making spectacular save after spectacular save. And that was really reassuring because he did not look good in the second game. And I didn't get to see much of the third game of the series because I was busy driving during that game. But to see him bounce back in game 4, which was an elimination game for Rockford and a series clincher for Grand Rapids, and see him mount the pads the way he did down the stretch when Rockford was pushing hard to tie it. I mean, talk about a morale booster for the Griffins and just deflation for the Rockford Ice Hogs. He was fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, man. And I like that you brought up Cossa there too, just because that's obviously someone that's going to get a lot of not only just limelight in these games from the fan base, but all off season he's going to be a talking point, and a lot of next year, obviously, he's going to be a talking point. So yeah, man, I mean, this can only be good for him, right? The further they go in the postseason and in the higher intensity games that he's out on the ice for, can only, in my eyes, be good for his development. So that's obviously a great sign as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Other notable performer, I think Carter Mazur was great in this game. And I guess with talking about Mazur, we can kind of transition directly into talking about our 3 stars of the series, because we're just talking about different our notable performers from the series clincher. But I mean, the 3 stars of the series, in my opinion, are pretty much the guys we just stated. First star, Jonathan Berggren. I mean, it's hard to argue with, even if you have questions about his overall play. The fact that he scored 3 game winners, he had 5 points in 4 games. Like, you can't look past that. Like I said, you can't measure clutch factor, and he was in the right place at the right time in every single one of the wins to seal the deal for the Grand Rapids Griffins. So that's my first star. Second star I have as Austin Czarnik, who we already mentioned as the other difference maker in game 4. 4 points in 4 games. He had an assist and a goal in the fourth game of the series, the assist was on Carter Mazur's goal, the first one. A sneaky play by Mazur, just very calmly floating down low, stick in the air, standing upright, acting like he's not going to do much, and all of a sudden set. And Berggren does a nice job to force Rockford off the puck. Czarnik sweeps in and just beauty feed for Mazur. Bell. Rockford took it. So and then that takes me to Mazur, who is my third star. So I think those three are clearing away the 3 stars, but there's tons of honorable mentions. There's a lot of players who stepped up in the series. You got anyone different?
No. And we talked about that off air too. I think it was kind of a slam dunk on who the 3 kind of notable players or stars, whatever you want to say, in the series were. But yeah, this was especially Sunday was a really good team effort, I think, all around.
Yeah, the last player I want to mention as far as notable performers go for the series, Marco Kasper. He got the empty netter to seal the deal in the series. He also scored a goal in the third game of the series as well, the game that I mostly missed. And I thought he's kind of the opposite of Jonathan Berggren, where he wasn't really showing up as much on the score sheet, but his overall game looked really solid. I liked a lot of what I saw out of Kasper. I remember game 1, he wasn't backing down from Rockford's physicality and his aggressiveness, which I love to see. So that was fun. And then also, the one thing I wanted to note is, and Bob Kaiser, the play-by-play voice for the Griffins, mentioned this as well. Their power play's got to get it going. While the Griffins really outplayed the Rockford Ice Hogs for the majority of this hockey game, I thought they were the better team. Their power play, I think, is 0 for 8 in the series, and you just you gotta score on the power play if you want to make it deep into the playoffs. Now, it's great that they're scoring goals at 5-on-5. That's the biggest thing. That's the most important thing, right? Like we talked about the Red Wings, right? Like you can have a top 10 power play, but if you're not scoring at 5-on-5, you're not going to win the cup. But you got to also, Griffins are the opposite. Like you got to also take advantage of a couple of these special team opportunities to really, so these games aren't down to the wire. Give yourself a little padding if possible. And they had opportunities this series, 8 of them, even though the whistles were away in this game. But they still had 2 power plays and they didn't do much with them. So that's something that's got to get going forward if they want to make a deep run.
For sure. You want to get to player grades, whatever we're calling it?
Yeah, I mean, from there, we can just move on. We got 4 or 5 players left for player grades. Let's knock them out and finish them this episode. Let's go.
We'll do that right. Dude, you're so grainy. It's hilarious. We'll do that right after this. Gonna tell you today about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is the formula for winning championships, and also it keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, don't look at me like that. You're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and all the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home that huge win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Bang.
Are we back? It's lagging like it's lagging like crazy on my end. So
we're back. We're good. You can you can take us away here.
Maybe for segment 3 you should lead us out of break so I know when to start talking. I'm like,
so we're not just staring at each other and I'm just like, yeah, okay.
The entirety of that ad read, you're frozen to me. So that's why I looked at you like that, because you're like the entire time. Anyways, segment 2, Lockdown Red Wings podcast. You gotta love rural internet. Want to move on and finish up our player grades in this one. We got one long conversation, then I think a few short ones, so we should have no problems wrapping up in the last 15-20 minutes of this episode. We hit that share screen button. Give us the look we're looking at, and we're not gonna bury the lead like we haven't buried the lead at all. The bulk majority of this series that we've done, the player evaluations, and we're not going to do that again today. We're going to lead off with the one you guys want to talk about the most, and that's going to be Alex DeBrincat. And it was intentional that we left him to the last episode, because I knew that he was probably going to be the one that people had the most split opinions on. And I think, Scotty, you and I are in agreement that we're a lot more forgiving on Alex DeBrincat's season than other people are.
Yes, I do think that the reason we are more forgiving, though, is not entirely because of him, which I do want to point out. And we'll break down, obviously, we've talked a lot this season about how he stepped up in other areas, which I still believe and I think is true and will be part of this conversation. But I also think that, goal scoring really wasn't an issue very consistently throughout the year for this hockey team. And if it was, then I think maybe a lot more people, ourselves maybe even included, would have been more frustrated with the lack of goal scoring, right? Like we got the organization as a whole, and obviously just the Wings as a whole this season just got so much depth scoring that wasn't really I don't know, predicted going into the season. And the depth players on this team were able to, especially, outside of the month of March, were able to provide a lot of goal scoring that again at one point had the Wings as like, a top 5 scoring team in the NHL just purely on how many goals they scored. Now, obviously, they slipped down to whatever 8 or 9, I think, by the end of the year, but that's still top 10. You're right, fringe top 10 team. So I do think that we are more forgiving, and again, a lot of that has to do with his improved defense, his career high in assists, like his much improved transition game. Like all of that is very true. But at the same time, I think one of the biggest reasons is not even really anything he did. It's just the fact that the team was scoring goals, really, despite the fact that he wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that they were scoring more than we anticipated. And I think that's only really true personally in 2 categories. I think it was Raymond and Kane, the acquisition of Kane, that helped supplement
Kane
the
helps a
missing
lot.
goals. Well, and Raymond scoring over 30 helps a lot too, because going into
Sure.
the season, we thought like 2025, just based on our perception of what he was. I think we got pretty much the scoring we anticipated from almost every other player, but those 2 guys added 50 goals to the season that we weren't anticipating. It really helped supplement and replace DeBrincat's lack of production goals wise. But if we're going to do these evaluations and stay true to our definition of what these evaluations are, which is personal expectations, I mean, we said going into the season that the minimum we expected of DeBrincat was 30 goals. I remember that. And it's the same total he had from last year. So while it is nice to see that his defense improved as tremendously as it did, and his, like you said, transition game was there, and his hustle was always there. That was never in question. And a lot of times he was in the right spots, and he just sailed it wide or hit the post. It felt like he hit 1,000 posts this year. Our expectation was at least 30 goals, and he got 27. So I think you can still put him in below expectations, but I think everything else he did this year really boosts him up. So like, he's definitely not failing in my eyes, but I just can't put him in meeting expectations either, just because our expectations were different than what we got.
Yeah, no, I think this is a slam dunk below expectations. I feel like we've said slam dunk a lot, which is like, I guess, good, because that means I've said it a lot. Okay, fair enough. Which I guess is good, because that means that we've had some fairly easy decisions here that are kind of clear cut. But yeah, I think Brinket falls into that category. I completely agree. Like he did, we've mentioned, this is now like the 4th time we've already mentioned it. He did step up in other areas, but at the end of the day, we brought him in to be the high end, 30 to 40 goal scorer. And he wasn't even close to that. And even when you look at the goal total that he had this year, a lot of that was in the first month and a half of the season, right? If you even break it down to after the first, 6 to 8 weeks of the season, it gets even more dry, right? It gets even more kind of bleak and few and far between. So, yeah, I think my mindset with this is, okay, if he was meeting expectations, then that means that for the rest of his contract, year in and year out, I would be okay with what he did this year. And that isn't true. I need more goal scoring in the future. I'm going to expect and hope for an uptick in goal scoring. So for me, that makes it pretty easy to put him in below, despite the fact that we will go to bat for the other areas of his game in which he stepped up.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of like our Michael Rasmussen conversation, where going forward, we will have adjusted expectations of what we think. I mean, we should have adjusted expectations of all these players after what we've seen this season. But with DeBrincat, now next season, we might be like, okay, he's 25 to 30 realistically, but we know we're going to get 40 assists, or high 30s to low 40s in the assist category. So that's going to be where we expect him from now on. Now, if that's our expectation next year and he replicates that production, he's in meeting expectations. But just unfortunately, we were expecting more in the back of the net from his own stick. But his playmaking ability, especially with Kane, that pipeline went the other way than we were expecting. We thought Kane would come in, and he did it sometimes. He did for sure. You thought Kane would come in and just set up DeBrincat for goals, but there was a lot of instances where Cat was the one saucing the puck to Kane for the finish, and that was you think back on it like, oh, well, no doubt it would be a two-way street, but you're not thinking that way then. You're thinking Kane's a passer, DeBrincat's a finisher. But yeah, it was a little bit below expectations, but that does not mean that we were like, obviously I'm disappointed the goal scoring wasn't there, but the passing, the assist total, everything else he brought, like, I think I still love this player, man. I think I still am in love with DeBrincat as a player.
Yeah, no, and again, I think you're just more like consistent scoring, and even if he's never consistent and it's always streaky, like, that's fine, I guess. But I think you're 7 goals away from being like a lot more, like significantly more okay with how he looked this season. And 7 goals isn't nothing, but it's not the world either. So I think next year is going to be a really interesting year, if you will, for DeBrincat. If you don't have anything else, we can hit another break and then get on to the last few players here.
You said the banned word.
What?
Interesting.
I know. That's why I paused and said it funny. Okay, we'll be back right after this. Going to talk to y'all today about our friends over at Monopoly Go. All right. Let's take a quick time out here and talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're thinking. We already talked about that earlier in the show, and that is true, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you can unlock. And there's so much to get. Like I said earlier, unique stickers that you can trade with friends and complete albums for even bigger prizes. There's cool new pieces that you can travel boards with. There's a ton of new boards. There's hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure and so much more. There's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it for free in Google Play or the App Store. Game on. All right, we're back, Brian. Just so you're aware, we're totally 100% back right now. And who's up now? Is that Joey V?
That would be Joe Veleno, correct? Ooh,
nice.
This is a player. I'm trying not to say the word. This is a
player
who I have.
You're right about that.
Who I have a lot of thoughts about, because he started the season pretty strong. And I remember our expectations were just pretty basically to have a better year than he had last year. He had a pretty bad year last year, and he didn't take that step forward we were expecting. He did technically take a step forward in production for a guy who played mostly bottom 6 minutes at center and at wing. He got some time in top 6 center role when Larkin went out the first time, because Ken Comfort had to slide up to the 1C. He broke his point total from last season. He set last season at 20 points. This season, he broke it with 28 points. He scored 12 goals, career high in goals, assists, points, and everything. But he kind of disappeared in the second half. A lot of players, but then he never really made a reappearance. I don't know where to put Joe Veleno. I think he might be like on that barrier of meeting and below expectations. And the only reason I would think to put him in below expectations is simply because of the fact that it felt like he kind of disappeared in the second half of the season, where in the first half of the season, he was an effective bottom six center.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know. Maybe we didn't talk about it a lot in the second half, but you have to remember what our preseason expectation of Joe Veleno was. We legitimately were having conversations about, like, if this dude doesn't get off to a hot start, he's out of here. That was legitimately the preseason talk surrounding Veleno on this show. Like, we were. I mean, I was very vocal about how disappointed of a year he had last season, and going into this year, the conversation legitimately was like, man, hopefully he gets off to a hot start. If he doesn't show out this year, he might just not be back next year. And I think that at a minimum, he has gotten to a point where we're not going, oh my goodness, like, get Veleno off this team, or like he's so unproductive that he doesn't have a valuable spot on this roster. So, like, in my head, and maybe this was just again because I was a little bit more vocal about his struggles last season, but in my head, this is like either exceeding or meeting, not below or meeting. Like, again, like, we have to remember what the conversation was surrounding Veleno in August, because it was bleak, man. It was not great.
Well, I remember we have him. I have a screenshot of it. We have him in exceeding expectations at the halfway point when we did the midseason evaluations, because I remember just how much he was, I'm not going to say balling out, but balling out for Joe Veleno, right? He was hustling.
Sure.
He looked fast. He was winning faceoffs. He was getting into the corners. He was the first one to always go engage in puck battles, it felt like. But just down the stretch, he vanished. So I think I hesitate just because of how bad the second half of the season was, and
I'm okay with meeting.
Meeting is where I think that's the middle ground here.
I'm okay with that, and I think that that's fair too, because the expectation for Veleno was, if he's not going to, like, crash and burn, it was to be a solid middle six, depth kind of center option, and that's what he was, throughout the season. And I think he did that enough to where people are okay, with him making it through the summer.
No, I mean, you were right. It's kind of like the Alex Lyon conversation where I think I had a misconception of what our expectations were, and you're right, and you've refreshed my memory about where we thought or what we thought of Joe Veleno going into the season. And you're right. Technically, we were like, he's going to be battling for a roster spot, and
Right.
he played 80 games. So he played 80 games, and he broke his career high in point total by 8. So while he did vanish in the second half of the season, which will bump him down to meeting expectations, you're right. You are correct, Scotty. I think that's the right spot for him. Next up on the list, Jake Woolman for the Detroit Red Wings. Another guy, well, he actually physically vanished off the lineup down the stretch because he got hurt, and then he was medically healthy, but he wasn't healthy. And with Edvinsson playing so well, they didn't feel the need to force him back into the lineup. This is a guy we had in meeting expectations at the midseason evaluations, and I think I'm comfortable leaving him there. We saw the offensive upside out of Jake Woolman that we expected. He also broke his career high in goal totals as well. He brought the offensive upside we expected. I do believe he was overwhelmed with the deployment that they used him in. I think he is at his peak a second pair defenseman. And at the time, he was just the only one who had any sort of chemistry with Moritz Seider. He definitely did not reach the highs we saw of him last year. But we're also, again, just like with the Moritz Seider conversation, are aware that he was number 2 in toughest deployments in the league next to Moritz Seider. And let's face it, Jake Woolman is not Moritz Seider. He's a very good defenseman, but I think that next season, if he might be better off playing on the second pair if they can find, if maybe Ben Sherratt's the solution long term, or they find another left-hand D to slot with Seider, because I think first pair minutes are a little bit too much for Woolman, but I like him as a second pair option. I like him as a power play option, and they just have a lot of options on the left side in general. For, like, you're not going to bump Edvinsson off the second pair unless you're putting him on the top pair. But Woolman's going to be a fantastic defenseman that you can put anywhere in the lineup and slot him in on the power play. I think that meeting expectations is fine. I like I said, I think he was a little overwhelmed on the top pair, but given what we saw of him, I thought he was exactly what we thought he was.
Yeah, no, I'm okay with meeting. I completely agree. I'm really, really excited, I think is the word, for Wallman's season next year, especially if Ghost doesn't come back. I think that, if this team is trying to get more defensively oriented or defensive minded, and Ghost isn't a priority for them this offseason, which I think we both agree, like we're leaning on him not coming back probably. I'm very, very excited for the offensive step he could take forward if he starts getting not the aggressive deployment necessarily that Ghost got, but if he starts getting some of those minutes of, like we need offense, fast type of deployment. And obviously, again, as you mentioned, on special teams as well on the power play. So yeah, I think I'm pretty pumped for him going forward still, and I think for this year, this is a pretty easy meeting. I would agree.
Yeah, we got 2 more guys to get to. We're not talking clean. Sorry, Scotty.
Man,
This is the same tier list from midseason, so he's still on there. But Simon Edvinsson, he played 16 games with the Detroit Red Wings. I think technically he usually wouldn't meet our bar for who we talk about, but Simon freaking Edvinsson. So honestly, that final 16 games, I thought he was pretty much exactly what I would expect of a guy taken in the first round, 6th overall. He immediately slotted into the second pair, played big minutes, and played on the penalty kill, and he looked good there. Expectations are high when you're taking that high, and he's had a few seasons down there in Grand Rapids, and by the time he made it, he looked ready for it. There were a couple rookie mistakes, but for me, Simon Edvinsson met my expectations.
yeah, this is I agree for starters. I also think that there's a difference between or not a difference between, but there's a it's important to note that he looked significantly better than he did in his previous NHL stint, but we were also expecting him to. So like he's meeting expectations. That doesn't mean that he doesn't look way better than he did the first time he played at the NHL level, when we were talking about him, looking maybe mildly overwhelmed or
Yes.
whatnot last season. So yeah, I think the most important thing is he proved that going into next fall, this dude has a roster spot on opening night.
Yeah, and you want to just knee-jerk reaction because he did look good to put him in exceeding expectations, because you're like, oh, rookie playing those big minutes. Yeah, that exceeded my expectations, but I think that's a little unfair, just because, not unfair like a negative connotation, but just because you remember where he was taken. You come into the league, it's expected that you're going to play minutes like that. And he did, and he looked up to the task this time. So, I agree with you that next season, he's got to be, as you would put, a slam dunk to make the roster. The final thing, Scotty, I feel like we kind of have to tier him just because he ended up playing 32 NHL games. And if we're going to tier Simon Edvinsson, who played 16, you got to do Austin Czarnik as well. He only had 1 point in 32 games. Definition of, great way to end the episode, leading with the same guy we basically let it off with. He feasts at the AHL level, but at the NHL level, he struggles to produce points. Heart hustle guy, you know exactly what you're going to get out of him. Great guy to have as a depth option to call up when an injury does occur if you don't want to expose any rookies to limited minutes. I would say he's meeting or slightly below expectations, because I would still want you to have more than 1 point in 32 games, but I also just have an understanding of what Austin Czarnik is, and that's like quadruple A player equivalent of the NHL player.
Yeah, I think this is meeting, and I think that it's good that it's meeting, right? Again, like you want to just know what you have in your AHL depth. Like that's what you want. You want your organizational depth to be able to, you want to be able to look at any of those guys that are kind of on the fringe spot, or get called up when someone's hurt or whatnot, and just know what you're going to get. And I think he provided what we expected him to provide, which is, not a whole lot on the score sheet, but like if you expected Czarnik to come up here and light it up, like that's kind of on you. So yeah, I think this is a pretty easy meeting.
So this is our final list. Scotty, in case you're
Why
curious,
are we not putting in Clean Costin? I'm confused.
he's not on the team, Scotty.
But he was.
He's
Played more
not
games than Edvinsson.
we're not doing clean costing.
Above and beyond.
I knew you were going to do that. That's why I didn't want to grade him. So just by comparison, at the midseason evaluations, the Red Wings had 2 players in above and beyond. At the end, they had 3. Difference here, Lucas Raymond got a promotion from exceeding to above and beyond. In the midseason, we had 7 players in exceeding. Now we only have 4. One of those, obviously, the aforementioned Raymond getting the promotion, but that meant that we had another 2 players get demoted from exceeding to beneath that, and that would be Joe Valeno and Sprong, who both got demoted to meeting expectation. And meeting expectations in midseason 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and now we have a lot more. Obviously, we added 2 more players to that, but we also had 4 players in below expectations, and now we have 6. So a couple more players got added to below expectations because they had lackluster second half. And then in both, the only players to be in failing was Justin Holl.
Yeah, well, I think that totally makes sense what you just laid out. They the crash and burn of the season, the complete bottoming out of this team was and I guess their hot streak was right around where the halfway point in the season would have been as well, but the big kind of bottoming out of this team happened in March, and in March obviously hadn't happened when we did this at the All-Star break. So I think that totally makes sense that we had some, obviously Raymond going up at the top, but everything else it looks like kind of slid down a little bit, and I think that makes a lot of sense.
We got to end the episode here. I understand that, but it is interesting too to think if maybe instead of doing, because obviously this postseason evaluation is for the entirety of the season, and we're not going to do this because I know you get your guys' patience with player evaluations only goes so far. But if we had done just second half and then did full season, because I guarantee you, if we just did second half evaluations, it would look a lot different than this one. I think we'd have a lot more players further down on the list just because of how bad that second.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. It's a really good point.
We did midseason during the All-Star break. That was February. Yeah. So that would make sense. All right, Scotty. Any final thoughts, buddy?
I don't think so, man. We ball.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow. Same time, same place. Your team every day.